Say a person stole something small, or got caught in some local disorder, and the answer was not a quiet fine handed over in a room somewhere. It might be a post in the market. It might be the stock set where people were already buying bread, arguing over prices, carrying baskets, dragging children along. So the punishment was dropped right into ordinary traffic. That already tells you part of it. The sentence was for the offender, but it was also for everyone passing by with turnips, cloth, fish, gossip, and half a morning to spare. People stopped because it was in front of them. Some laughed. Some muttered. Some stood just long enough to make sure they knew who it was. Some saw a neighbor and pretended not to. Once somebody was fixed in place like that, pain was only one part of the job. Exposure did the rest. Being trapped where people could inspect your face, clothes, posture, and expression worked on your standing in the town. You were not just hurting for an hour. You were being turned into something others would remember next week. And the details were usually arranged so nobody missed the message. A shaved head said one thing. A sign hung on the body said another. Forced kneeling, bare back, hands bound where everyone could see them. All of that made the verdict readable before anybody asked questions. Even people who arrived late could take one look and understand. Thief, liar, disorderly person, blasphemer, repeat nuisance. That is why punishments could look so pointed. If the crime involved the hand might be the thing at risk. If the offense involved speech, the mouth or tongue could be made part of the display. Authorities liked punishments that looked connected to the offense because the crowd could read them fast. No long explanation needed. The body carried the label. And they needed that kind of clarity because the cleaner options did not always work. A fine sounds simple until the person has no money. Then the sentence is useless unless relatives can scrape it together, and sometimes they would not or could not. So now the court still needs something it can actually enforce by the end of the day. Prison was not the neat answer people imagine either. A jail cell often meant holding somebody for a short stretch while something else happened. Trial, payment, transfer, ransom, formal sentence. Keeping lots of people locked up long-term cost food, space, guards, and patience. Those all ran short fast. So if money failed and cells were limited, the easiest surface left was the person standing there. Skin, hair, hands, back, face. Those did not require a permanent institution. You needed rope, wood, iron, a post, officials, and enough witnesses. The punishment could be delivered, seen, and finished in public, without maintaining the person afterward for years. That is also why so many punishments were built to do several jobs at once. Hurt them, yes, but also shame them, identify them, warn others, and settle the matter visibly. One sentence had to stretch. It had to make up for weak policing, thin records, and the fact that not everybody would ever stand in front of a judge. So the event often started before the actual blow. The condemned person had to be brought out, escorted, announced. Sometimes put on a cart, sometimes marched on foot. That movement through town mattered. People heard there would be a punishment and drifted toward the route. Shopkeepers stepped out. Children followed at a distance until someone told them to stop. Then the awkward part really kicked in. The accused was not being led past strangers only. They were passing doors and corners that knew them already. A baker who sold to them. A woman who had borrowed from their household. Men who had drunk with them. People they had argued with last month. Every familiar face added another layer to the sentence. Officials leaned on ceremony because ceremony kept the thing from looking messy. There were set words, escorts, fixed stopping points, proper reading of charges, formal gestures. Without that, it could look like a beating. With it, the punishment looked organized. Authority had shape, sequence, personnel, and witnesses. The route itself became part of the control. And crowds were useful exactly because they were inconvenient. They pressed in too close. They blocked movement. They shouted over the reading. Someone laughed at the wrong moment. Someone tried to ask what the person had actually done. Someone else claimed the sentence was too much or too little. The officials had to keep the rhythm going so the crowd absorbed the verdict instead of swallowing it. That could go wrong very quickly. If the condemned looked defiant, some people admired that. If they fainted too early, the whole scene could become clumsy and embarrassing. If they cried well, confessed openly, or looked smaller and poorer than expected, the crowd might soften. A punishment meant to stiffen public obedience could suddenly produce pity instead. Social rank made that even more awkward. A known troublemaker from the edge of town might get jeers right away. Someone from a decent household could pull murmurs instead. If the person had family standing nearby, that changed the air too. People watched the mother, the wife, the brothers, almost as much as the condemned. Their faces told the crowd how to react. Officials had to judge that mood in real time. Too soft, and people went home thinking the law had no teeth. Too hard, and the onlookers started shifting their weight and looking uneasy. If enough spectators decided the sentence was excessive, the display stopped advertising confidence and started advertising strain. That was a problem when public punishment was supposed to look steady and unquestioned. So one answer was to make sure the punishment lasted beyond the day itself. If the crowd might forget, the body could keep speaking afterward. Branding did that. So did missing ears, scarred backs, damaged hands, altered hair, or other marks that stayed visible after the scaffold was empty and the market stalls were back in place. Then the person had to carry the sentence into regular life. That was its own punishment routine. You show up to work marked. You try to bargain marked. You walk into a tavern marked. Anybody who had not seen the original event could still read that something had been decided about you. The law no longer had to stand beside you repeating the judgment. That had practical value. In a world without easy paperwork following everyone around, the altered body did some of the record-keeping. You did not need a clerk present to remind a village that this person had been whipped, branded, or mutilated. People saw it while buying cheese, unloading carts, hiring labor, arranging marriages, or choosing whom not to trust. That created the next difficulty. A punishment that damaged the body also damaged what the person could do with it. Hurt a hand, and you may have hurt a laborer. Scar the back, badly enough, and ordinary work gets slower for a while. Mark the face, and now every interaction begins with the sentence before the person even speaks. But authorities often accepted that trade because they were trying to solve immediate problems, not preserve the offender's comfort or future earnings. They wanted something hard to ignore, hard to deny, and hard to repeat without extra risk. If somebody stole again after already being marked, the mark itself could be used against them. It showed history without much argument, and communities learned these signs. People became fluent in them. A scar was not just a scar if everybody knew what local punishments looked like. Missing part of an ear, a branded shoulder, a changed gait after flogging. These could all enter ordinary conversation without anyone needing to tell the full story. The body arrived first. Rumor filled in the rest. That is part of why medieval punishments could keep turning brutal even when some methods were already familiar. Familiarity was a problem. If people saw the stocks every market week, the shock could wear off. They would still look, but they might look the way people look at routine street commotion. Curious for a minute, then back to onions and business. Once that happened, authorities had a new irritation on their hands. The sentence still existed, but its edge was getting dull. So there was pressure to make it clearer, longer, harsher, more memorable. A little more pain, a longer exposure, a stronger mark, a bigger procession. Something that pushed the event back to the center of attention. You can picture how that worked in practice. If a short public whipping no longer left much impression, maybe the number of strokes increased. If a brief display in the pillory let the crowd drift away too soon, Maybe the exposure lasted longer, or came with a written accusation attached. If ordinary shame no longer carried far enough, physical damage solved that by trailing the person afterward. And none of this happened in a calm vacuum. People were still trading, hauling water, dealing with mud, trying to finish work before dark. So punishment had to cut through daily distraction. It had to interrupt. It had to be legible from 10 paces away. It had to survive gossip. That practical demand kept pushing punishment toward things people could see instantly and remember unwillingly. The body handled all of that better than a receipt for a paid fine or a closed cell behind a wall. A prison sentence hidden indoors did not warn the market crowd in the same direct way. A fine paid quietly by relatives did not shame the culprit before neighbors. But a person tied up in public, marched across town, whipped at a post, or sent away marked, that reached everyone at once. And once people expected punishment to look like authority in public, authorities were stuck performing it that way. They had to show they could seize a body, move it, display it, and finish the sentence without losing control of the crowd. So every punishment became partly a test of administration, not just of the accused. Could they stage it cleanly? Could they keep order? Could they make the message stick? If they managed it, the results spread through talk long after the official words were over. People repeated how the condemned stood. Whether they resisted, whether they cried out, whether the mark was visible, whether the family was there, whether the sentence seemed fair. That retelling did almost as much work as the punishment itself, so authorities kept choosing penalties that gave people something vivid to repeat. But that brought the same risk back around. The more public and memorable the event, the less control officials had over what exactly got remembered. Sometimes it was fear. Sometimes it was ridicule. Sometimes people remembered the condemned looking stubborn, or pitiful, or badly treated. So the next time, there was pressure again to sharpen the display, tighten the ritual, leave a clearer mark, and make sure nobody went home saying the law had looked weak. And that is how one ordinary offense could keep expanding into a whole public operation. Escort, reading, posture, blow, display, crowd management, gossip, permanent mark, trouble finding work afterward, closer scrutiny the next time, and then another sentence waiting if the first one had not scared enough people.